The crash site. The sky burned orange and red as the human ship fell from above, like a broken star. Zorvak stood tall on the cold cliff, his dark armor glowing faintly under the twin moons of Drakkar Prime. He watched the fire trail in silence. He hated humans. To him they were weak, noisy, and full of lies. His brother died in a human ambush 3 cycles ago. His people suffered because of the war they started. Now one more human ship had entered his skies and crashed into the Deadlands. It was forbidden, land full of poisonous winds and buried bones. But Zorvak did not care. He wanted to make sure none survived. He turned toward his scout, who was shaking in fear. "Shall we send drones?" "Lord." Zorvak's voice was cold as steel. "No, I will go." Alone, he leapt off the cliff, his heavy boots landing hard against the cracked ground. As he walked, the ashes from the burning wreck floated like snow. The smell of fuel, blood, and death filled the air. He reached the crash site where the ship had torn into the earth like a giant claw. Metal was everywhere, broken and twisted like bones. He stepped over a shattered wing and moved deeper into the wreck. He expected to find human soldiers, maybe a pilot, maybe someone crawling for help. Instead, he found silence. He heard the wind whispering through the holes in the ship, and then he heard it. A tiny sound, soft and shaking. A whimper. His ears perked. Zorvak turned slowly, weapon ready, his claws twitching. He moved past a broken wall and saw something glowing, faintly, beneath the rubble. He used his massive strength to lift the debris, and what he saw made him freeze. It was not a soldier, it was a human baby. A little girl covered in dust with a tiny blanket wrapped around her. Her face was red from crying, and her lips trembled with fear. She was too young to speak or understand what was happening. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and wet. And then something strange happened. She reached out her small hand and touched his clothes. Zorvak stood still like stone. This hand had ended lives, burned ships, crushed bones. But now a baby was holding it. Like it was soft. He could end this small life in 1 second. And no one would ever know. But he didn't. She giggled. Zorvak felt something heavy in his chest, something he had not felt since his brother died. He looked around the wreck again. There were no other survivors, no guards, no threat. Only this child breathing alone among fire and death. He knelt slowly, not knowing why, and the baby reached for his face, her fingers brushing his cheek where his battle scars lived. Zorvak closed his eyes for a moment as if her touch burned deeper than any weapon. He lifted her gently in one arm. Her weight was nothing, but it felt like everything. He wrapped her in the edge of his cloak and stepped out of the wreck. The wind howled across the Deadlands, but he didn't care. His comm buzzed. "Lord Zorvak, did you find anything?" He stared at the child now sleeping against his chest and spoke slowly. "Only wreckage." He crushed the comm under his foot, then turned and walked into the night with the baby in his arms. Something inside him had changed, and he didn't understand it yet, but he knew one thing. He could not leave her behind. Not now, not ever. The warrior and the crib. Zorvak walked through the endless night of the Deadlands with the baby girl asleep in his arm. Her warmth felt strange against his chest, like she did not belong in this cruel world. Yet somehow she survived it. He had seen warriors fall under lighter wounds, and yet this fragile creature breathed through fire and steel. Every few steps he looked down at her face. Her tiny breath steadied, her fingers gripping the edge of his cloak like she trusted him completely. She had no idea what he was. He was a destroyer, a killer of her kind, and yet she held him like he was home. Back at his war camp, his soldiers watched him return covered in ash and silent as a ghost. They noticed something wrapped in his cloak but dared not speak. Zorvak walked past them and entered his private quarters, closing the doors behind him. Only then did he lower her onto a soft resting mat in the corner of the room. The room was dark with sharp weapons lining the walls, trophies from long-dead battles, and now in the center of all that horror lay a baby girl with her soft pink skin and gentle breath. Zorvak sat down in front of her, confused by his own thoughts. Why didn't he end her? Why did he carry her miles through poison wind and enemy soil? He should have dropped her where he found her. But he couldn't. Something about her silence, her courage in crying without fear of him, touched something buried inside him. His thoughts were broken when she woke up. She blinked slowly and then began to cry, her little fists shaking in the air. Zorvak stood quickly, unsure what to do. He had never held a child before, not even among his own kind. He tried humming a war chant, but the sound made her scream louder. He picked her up awkwardly, her head resting against his hard armor. He removed his shoulder plate, placing it gently on the floor, and then held her close again without the metal in between. Her crying softened. Zorvak did not understand it, but her small heartbeat calmed something in him. He needed help. He called for his medic Drathi, a soft-spoken healer who once studied human biology in secret during the war. When Drathi entered and saw the baby, his jaw dropped. Is that a human infant? Zorvak's voice was low and firm. Keep it quiet. She is mine now. Drathi did not ask questions, only nodded and stepped forward to examine the child. She is dehydrated, underfed. She should not be alive after such a crash, but somehow she is strong. She needs warmth. Milk shelter. Zorvak looked around the room full of death and war. He frowned. She cannot stay here. Build something better. A safe place for her. Drathi blinked in shock. You want me to build a nursery in a war base? Zorvak growled, do it, or I will use your bed instead. Within hours, things began to change. The armory beside his room was emptied and transformed. Weapons removed, rugs laid, soft lights hung from the ceiling. A special climate field was installed to match human infant needs. Drathi brought nutrient packs and a feeding bottle, and the soldiers whispered. They did not speak it loud, but they knew something had changed. Zorvak, who once ripped out the hearts of human prisoners, now walked slowly down the hall, carrying a baby on his shoulder, her tiny hand resting on his armor like a badge of peace. At night she would cry, and Zorvak would wake up every time. He did not understand lullabies, so he told her battle stories in a soft voice, and for some reason she would always sleep halfway through. One day while feeding her, she looked up at him and laughed, a real laugh full of light. Zorvak froze completely. It was the first time he had heard joy in years. He touched her forehead gently and whispered a name. Sora. She blinked as if she accepted it. Sora, little spark from the ashes. He named her that because she came from a fire that should have killed her, and yet she lived brighter than any flame. Zorvak didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if the humans would come searching, or if the council would punish him for keeping her. But he knew one thing. This child was not an enemy. She was a life, a gift, and he would protect her, even if the galaxy burned again. The council's eyes. The change in Zorvak's warbase did not go unnoticed. What was once a place of iron silence now echoed softly with laughter and tiny footsteps. The soldiers tried not to stare as Sora crawled across the polished floor, chasing a glowing hover drone like it was a toy. No one dared speak aloud, but even the most hardened warriors lowered their weapons when she passed. Zorvak watched it all from a shadowed balcony, arms crossed, face unreadable. He had trained these soldiers, for years turned them into perfect killers, but now they smiled when Sora touched their boots. He was no longer just their commander. He had become something else, and not everyone was happy about it. Far across the solar ring in the capital of the Dralak Empire, the High Council gathered in the Tower of Law. Holograms buzzed to life, showing footage leaked from within Zorvak's base. An alien general feeding a human child. An alien nursery filled with toys and warmth. A child laughing in the arms of the enemy. The elders stared in silence. Counselor Vren narrowed his eyes. Has he lost his mind? Keeping a human infant on a military ground, one of the watchers nodded. Worse, he's protecting it. We believe he destroyed the flight recorders. He lied about the crash. This is treason. Vren stood. Zorvak was our most feared weapon. Now he cradles the spawn of our enemies. We will send an inspector, see if this foolishness can be corrected quietly. Back at the warbase, Zorvak placed Sora in her crib, gently tucking the blanket around her. She was larger now, stronger. Her eyes more curious every day. She had learned to grab his horns and giggle like she controlled the world. He let her. He would let her do anything. She was his light in a world of ash. But then the alarm buzzed. A ship had arrived. Unauthorized. Zorvak stepped out of his chamber to find an official, waiting in the landing bay. Tall, thin robes trailing behind him like snakeskin. His name was Thiraken, Inspector of the High Council. He bowed stiffly. General Zorvak, I come with orders from above. I am to evaluate your command performance and inspect your quarters. Zorvak did not blink. Why now? Thirek smiled with no warmth. There are concerns about your loyalty and the rumors of a human child under your care. Zorvak's muscles tightened, but his voice remained cold. There are no humans here. Thirek stepped forward. Then you won't mind if I look for myself. Before Zorvak could reply, the inspector moved past him, heading toward the living quarters. Zorvak followed closely, heart beating faster than in any battlefield. He reached the door to the nursery just seconds before Thirek and stopped him. This area is restricted. Thirek raised a brow. Even for the council, Zorvak lowered his voice like thunder. Especially for the council. You want a report. You will get one, but you will not enter that room. Not while I breathe. The two locked eyes, and Thirek saw it. This wasn't just a soldier disobeying. This was a warrior willing to fight for something, or someone. The inspector stepped back slowly and smiled again. But this time it was different. She changed. You, didn't she? The child. Zorvak did not answer. He didn't have to. The truth hung in the air between them. Thirek turned to leave. I will make my report. They may not like it. Zorvak's voice was like a blade. Let them come. But if they try to take her, I will burn their ships from the sky. That night, Zorvak sat beside Sora's crib, watching her sleep. His claws rested on the floor next to her soft toy. He knew what he had done was not forgivable to his kind. He had not just saved a human. He had loved one. But he would not run. Not hide. If the galaxy wanted to call him a traitor, let them. Because he was no longer fighting for his people. He was fighting for her. And he would never let her go. Shadows over the cradle. The stars above Drakar Prime shifted slowly in the black sky. But the tension inside the warbase was like a storm ready to explode. Zorvak stood in the main chamber, staring at the galaxy map, his arms folded and his mind burning with thoughts. He knew the council wouldn't stay silent. They never did. They would send more than just an inspector next time. They would send soldiers or assassins, or both, all for a baby. A small, helpless girl who had never held a weapon, never given a command, never hurt anyone. But to them, she was a dangerous symbol of weakness, a reason to punish him. Behind him, the door slid open and Drathi entered quietly. She's awake. General Zorvak turned, his face softening. He followed Drathi down the hall toward the nursery. Inside, Sora was sitting up on a cushion, holding a small hollow ball and pressing buttons randomly. The ball blinked and made strange alien animal sounds. She laughed, a sound so pure it almost made Zorvak forget what was coming. He sat down beside her, his giant form like a mountain beside her tiny frame. She crawled into his lap without fear, curling into his chest as if she belonged there. He looked at Drathi. How long does she have before the council acts? Drathi's voice was quiet. Not long. They're sending someone powerful. Someone known for clean removals. Zorvok growled deep in his throat. They want her erased like she never existed, like her life means nothing, but not while I breathe. The next morning, the guards reported unusual movement in orbit. A stealth craft had entered the atmosphere without permission. Zorvok was already in his armor when the alert sounded. The base fell into defensive protocol. Doors sealed. Drones activated. Snipers moved into position. But Zorvok wasn't focused on defending the base. He was focused on one thing: protecting Sora. He handed her gently to Drathi, his voice full of quiet fire. Take her to the bunker under the armory. Do not come out until I return. Drathi nodded, holding the baby close as Sora looked up in confusion. Zorvok bent down, his forehead gently touching hers. You are not just a human. You are mine. And no one will take you from me. Then he turned and walked to war. The assassin came like a shadow. Fast, silent, deadly, clad in black armor that bent light, carrying 2 energy blades that hissed like venom. She moved through the base like smoke, dodging lasers, slicing through drones with clean precision. The soldiers fell back in fear, their shots missing or bouncing off her shield. She was the Council's perfect tool. No name, no voice, only purpose. Zorvok waited for her in the Great Hall. His twin axes were ready. His eyes burned with fury. You came for a child. The assassin didn't answer. She attacked without a word, blades spinning, energy crackling. Their clash shook the walls. Steel met plasma in sparks of red and white. Zorvok fought like a beast. Every strike meant to kill, not survive. He had nothing to protect but one life, and for that, he became unstoppable. She moved like a dancer, fast and fluid, but he was a storm, raw and powerful. He took a deep cut across the shoulder but didn't stop. She tried to stab his heart. He caught her blade with his bare hand and twisted. The metal screamed. With a roar, he threw her across the chamber. She landed hard but rose again. Breathing heavy now, you're protecting a mistake, she said finally. She is a human. Zorvok's voice was pure rage. She is a child. She is my daughter. She blinked behind her visor. That pause was all he needed. With a blast from his arm cannon, he sent her flying into a wall. She slumped down, unconscious. Zorvok stood over her body, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm. Let the council hear this. She lives, she stays, and anyone who touches her again dies. His voice echoed through the silent base. That night, Sora slept in his arms again, unaware of the battle fought in her name. Zorvok looked down at her face, peaceful and warm against his chest. He had chosen a path with no return, but it was the only one that felt right. He was no longer a soldier of the Empire. He was a father now. And fathers do not surrender. Not ever. A father's warning. The stars above Drakkar Prime glowed calmly again, but peace inside the warbase was an illusion. Zorvok stood on the upper watchtower with blood-stained armor and tired eyes. He had fought off the Council's assassin. He had broken every rule his people believed in. And still, he knew this was just the beginning. They would return, stronger, crueler, and next time, they might not care who else they burned to reach the child below him. In the training yard, soldiers moved in silence, their steps slower, their eyes uncertain. They had followed Zorvok for years, believed in his strength, feared his fury. Now they didn't know what to believe. Was he still the same warrior, or had the human child turned him into something soft? Inside his chamber, little Sora sat on the floor, stacking metal blocks into towers, and then knocking them down with happy shrieks. Her laugh reached Zorvok's ears like music he didn't know he needed. He closed his eyes and let the sound settle deep in his chest. Then came the message. It flashed red across his communicator, encrypted. By council code, he opened it without fear. Zorvak, you have defied your oath. You harbor a human on sacred ground. You fight against your own. Return the child to the tribunal for removal or face exile. He stared at the words and felt nothing but fire rise in his throat. He replied with one sentence, "Come for her again, and I will bury your tribunal in silence." He crushed the device in his hand and walked back inside. Drathi was feeding Sora from a heated nutrient pouch, the baby making a mess with both hands as she tried to grab the spoon. Zorvak sat beside them and watched quietly. "She's learning fast," Drathi said with a soft smile. "She already knows your name." Zorvak raised a brow. "She speaks." "Not with words, but when she sees you, she reaches out and smiles. She knows who you are. She knows you protect her." Zorvak looked at the girl, her face messy but glowing with joy. She didn't know about assassins, or exile, or war. All she knew was that she was loved. Suddenly the door opened. It was Captain Rel Hone of Zorvak's oldest warriors. He stepped inside with slow steps and a strange look in his eyes. "General, I must speak freely." Zorvak stood. "Speak." Rel lowered his gaze. "The council is offering rewards, land title, even command of a fleet to anyone who brings the child in alive." Zorvak's eyes narrowed, and some of the men, there, thinking, wondering if you've forgotten who we are. Zorvak stepped forward. "I have not forgotten. But maybe who we are needs to change." Relha's voice trembled. "They think she is dangerous, a symbol that we are weak. You hold a human child like she is your blood." Zorvak growled. "Lo, she is Captain Rel." Looked into his commander's eyes and saw something terrifying. Not madness, not softness, but purpose. "You would fight your own kind for her." Zorvak answered without pause. "I would destroy 1,000 armies for her. I would walk into black holes and burn suns to ash. Because she is mine, because she is innocent, because this war should never have touched her." Relch nodded slowly. "Then let me stand with you. I've seen enough blood. I'd rather guard a cradle than dig another grave." Zorvak placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we make our line here. They will come, but we will not fall." Within hours, the entire base changed. The soldiers who remained loyal fortified. Every wall turrets were recalibrated. Bunkers were filled with supplies. Escape pods were hidden near the nursery, and deep underground, a chamber was prepared with a last resort jump gate. If the base fell, if Zorvak died, Sora would escape, no matter what. At night, Zorvak sat by her crib again. She reached for his claw and held it tight. He lowered his forehead to hers and whispered, "You changed me. You woke something I thought was dead. I don't know if I can keep you safe forever, but I will try every breath. I have every drop of blood is yours." Outside, the stars began to shift again, and in the darkness beyond the system, more ships began to move. The council was not done, but neither was Zorvak. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. When monsters fall silent, a storm brewed in the blackness. Beyond Drakkar Prime 5, warships from the High Council broke hyperspace and drifted like shadows above the planet's surface. Each vessel carried weapons strong enough to melt mountains and wipe out entire colonies. And yet, their target was not a fortress, not a rebel fleet, just one warrior and a human child. Inside the warbase, the air had changed, not with fear, but with stillness. Like the quiet before a blade cuts air, Zorvak stood before his gathered soldiers in the main chamber, his presence heavy, voice steady. "They come not to fight us, but to erase something they do not understand. They think love is weakness, that mercy is failure. But today, we show them that love can make a warrior more dangerous than fear ever could." His voice echoed through the steel walls. The troops, those who had stayed, raised their weapons with a thunderous cry. For Sora, even those who once doubted now stood ready to die. They had seen her tiny hands pull at Zorvak's claws, seen her dance on bare feet through halls once soaked in blood, seen their commander, once a monster, smile for the first time in decades. That smile had changed them too. Drathi stayed deep in the underground chamber with Sora wrapped in protective fabric, her wide eyes blinking slowly as the ground above began to rumble. She did not cry. She simply stared upward as if she sensed everything. Zorvak watched the enemy ships descend through thick clouds, trails of flame marking their path. Then the first strike landed. The base shook, walls cracked, alarms screamed, but no one ran turrets activated. Drones swarmed into the sky, and Zorvak himself charged toward the western wall with his axes drawn. His first kill was silent. He leapt into the air, bringing down an enemy commander before the man even saw him. The battlefield erupted in chaos. Smoke filled the air, laser fire danced across the sky. But in the middle of it all, Zorvak fought with a purpose that no soldier could match. He didn't fight for glory. He didn't fight for orders. He fought for a laugh he had heard in the dark, for small hands that had once wiped tears on his armor. He fought for his daughter. Even enemy soldiers hesitated when they saw him, not because of his rage, but because of what they saw behind his eyes. Not hate, but fire born from love. Still, the Council's army was large and brutal. One by one, the defenders fell. Explosions ripped through the eastern towers. The main gate collapsed. Zorvak's body bled from 3 wounds, but he didn't stop, not even when a blade slashed through his side. He roared and broke the attacker's neck with his bare hand. Then the moment came. An elite squad broke into the underground bunker. Drathi stood between them and the crib, holding a shock rifle she had never fired before. They aimed. She pulled the trigger twice, missed both times. But before they could fire back, the wall exploded, and Zorvak came through it like a beast of legend. He tore through the squad with terrifying speed. His armor cracked, his blood leaving trails behind him. He stood over Sora's crib, panting, eyes glowing. More enemies stormed into the room. He prepared to strike. Then something strange happened. Sora stood up on tiny feet. She raised her arms toward the enemy. And for a moment, everything stopped. The enemy froze. Their fingers hesitated. Something in her eyes made them lower their weapons. Not fear, not confusion, but shame. One soldier dropped his blaster. He looked at Zorvak, then at the child, and stepped back. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, half of them had stopped fighting. Zorvak stared, stunned. Sora had not spoken a word, but her presence had done what no weapon could. It made monsters fall silent. Later, when the dust settled and the enemy ships were retreating, Zorvak stood outside the burning base. He was covered in blood, exhausted. But alive Sora sat on his shoulder, tiny fingers tangled in his thick battle skin. She giggled again. He smiled. You are more powerful than I ever was. You didn't need to fight to win. You only needed to be you. And that was enough. The heart of a warrior. The sun rose slowly over Drakor Prime, but it did not shine on a world of peace smoke. Still curled from the war base ruins, ash floated through the air like black snow. But for the first time in many cycles, there was no battle, cry echoing through the valleys. There was silence and life. Zorvak stood at the edge of the broken landing field, his armor cracked and dried blood still painting his arms. He stared at the horizon, his breath heavy, not from pain, but from relief. Behind him, the sound of small feet tapping the steel floor made him turn. Sora ran toward him with short steps, her little arms outstretched. She wore a simple cloak stitched by Drathi from the remains of old banners once used for war. The color was dull, but she made it glow. She reached him and crashed into his legs. Laughing, Zorvak knelt slowly and lifted her into his arms. She pressed her forehead to his, and he closed his eyes. This is why I did not die. This is why I chose to live. Drothi stepped forward, a medical pack slung across her back. We've scanned the skies. No more warships in orbit. The Council has pulled back. Zorvak looked at her with calm, measured eyes. Why? She answered softly. Because half their army refused to continue. They saw her, and something inside them broke. They said she looked at them like they were more than weapons. They dropped their rifles. Zorvak turned his gaze to Sora. She was now walking without help, speaking small words, and learning faster than anyone expected. But her power wasn't in technology. It wasn't strength. It was her heart, her purity. The way she could melt even the most frozen minds with a single innocent glance. She had done what war could not. She had changed them. Zorvak walked through the broken halls of his once great base. The walls were still scorched, but now covered in chalk drawings made by Soristic figures, stars, smiley faces. Some of the soldiers had even added their own clumsy stars and rough flowers. A strange peace had settled among them, one born not of surrender, but of choice. A week later, a small vessel landed at the far end of the valley. It bore no weapons, no banners, only one occupant, an elder of the council, old, frail, and no longer feared. He requested no escort. Zorvak met him alone. Sora perched on his shoulder. The elder bowed, his head slightly. You were supposed to be our greatest warrior. Zorvak answered plainly, I still am. The elder looked at the child. And now you are a father. Zorvak nodded once. Yes, and I would rather protect her than destroy 10,000 enemies. The elder's voice trembled. She is human. She is what we once swore to wipe out. Zorvak's voice was strong. Then let those old vows burn. She is not our past. She is our future. She could unite what we tried to kill. The elder looked deep into Zorvak's eyes and sighed. Then teach her well. Because if she falls, so will we all. He turned and left. Without another word, Zorvak returned to his soldiers with a new purpose. He was no longer just a warrior. He became a builder, a protector teacher. Years passed. The old banners were replaced with new ones. Half blue, half red, marked with the symbol of a child's open hand. Sora grew taller, smarter. She trained in both human language and Dralak warrior tradition. She could speak to beasts and command soldiers with the same ease. And though her hair was human silk, and her voice was light, there was fire in her blood, Zorvak's fire. She never forgot who raised her, and he never stopped calling her his daughter. One night, under a sky full of stars, she asked him, Why did you save me? Zorvak looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Because in that moment, you were the only thing in the universe I could not destroy. You were hope, and I needed that more than war. She smiled and held his claw with her small hand. Then I will never let go. And she never did. The alien who once hated all humans died an old warrior with a daughter at his side. And through her, his story lived on. Not in war songs, but in lullabies of a monster who learned to love.